former investment banker who went legit, got off Wall Street and started talking about Main Street. Hi, Carol. How are you?
Doing well, Glenn. Thanks for legitimatizing me. I guess is the right word there.
So I don't understand the job report and how you can make a mistake this massive over the entire year.
Well, as Mark Twain, it's attributed to him anyway, said there are three types of lies, damn lies, and statistics. And this goes back to how data is collected, how it's modeled, how it's manipulated, how it's revised, and why it makes absolutely no sense. I have seen the different reports, and yes, there has been massive downward revisions. Obviously, we just got the first December number, so only 11 months of last year have been reported, and 10 out of the 11 months have been revised downward. The scope of that, I've looked at multiple smart people's analysis. It's anywhere from 14% to 24%. There's a piece everyone agrees on. There's another piece that I can't tell if people are possibly double counting. But either way, it's just a massive shift. And the strange thing here is that, you expect data to be revised based on how it's collected, but usually that averages out over time. Maybe it's not a perfect amount, but like in 2022, the revisions, I think it was revised, downwards maybe for 5 months, and then with upward revisions and no revisions, when you netted it out, it was only off by 66,000. Having 10 out of 11 months being revised downward is either an oddity, it's lazy, or nefarious. Those are your three choices. Pick whichever your favorite door is for let's make a deal.
Okay, but what I understand is when you have to revise, you take that into account, especially if it's repeated a couple of months in a row, you start to change the algorithm. And you're like, no, it's slowing. Things need to be slowed down there because that's what we keep seeing. So it's not unusual to miscount for a while because you're not actually counting. It is a projection. Right. But if you're doing it for a year, it shows, like you said, you're either lazy or you're trying to cook the books because you should have made those adjustments. And what would account for this is that we're going into a recession. Is that true?
That's one possible interpretation. I think it's helpful perhaps for people to understand, how this data is collected and massaged, because we have these different methodologies, right? We have what was called the non-farm payrolls or the establishment survey, which is that headline number that everyone focuses on.
Right.
What they do is they only look at the payroll records of, the last time I checked, it was like just shy of 150,000 businesses and government agencies. And then they take that and they put it through seasonal adjustments and, all the different kinds of models to come up with their projection. But then there's an entirely different survey called the household survey or the current population survey, which only goes out to about 60,000 households, and they're getting their employment status and the demographic data. And it's very different because in the household survey, they're saying, are you employed? But when they go out to these businesses, they say how many people are on the payrolls. So first of all, the household survey captures things like agricultural workers, people who are self-employed, which we know is a huge portion of the population that don't have corporations, some other small groups. The establishment survey doesn't even have any of that. And if you have multiple jobs and you show up on multiple payrolls, you're counted multiple times in that survey.
Right.
So the data is bastardized, and I would argue not even relevant to how our country's economy is run, given the large amount of self-employment we have. But with all of that, we've seen, Glenn, a record high of almost 8.7 million people who are holding down multiple jobs. We are seeing a loss, and again, the time period is disputed, but over recent months, of 1.5 million full-time workers and adding 796,000 part-time workers. So going back to your question of recessionary trends, those are things that would make you scratch your head and say that's moving in the wrong direction. But who's picking up the slack for that? Well, that is the government. And the government jobs, we keep getting, I think the last 3 months, like 50,000 government jobs on average for the last few months. Like, that's not sustainable. And those don't have the same level of productivity because they are paid for by our tax dollars and or the printing of money. So all of those scenarios don't look great in terms of the trends for the economy.
So we haven't seen the numbers for December, but 216,000 jobs were added. This has not been revised yet. And 52,000 of those were government jobs, which brought us to an all-time high of 23 million employees for the federal government. It's an astounding number.
What I want to say on that is that, as I said, December, we've just gotten the first print. We haven't gotten a revision to it. Same thing with the previous periods. They keep revising that down. That means not only is it 52 over 216,000, but if they revise that down, it means it's going to be even a larger percentage that is government jobs. And that's what we've been seeing in terms of the trend, is that the government and all of this deficit spending that we're paying for in terms of inflation in our lives, is really what's creating the differential. But, what's crazy is jobs hasn't even been the issue. They keep touting that this is jobs, and look at how many jobs were created, even though many of them were reclaimed, not created from, when they shut down the economy. But that really hasn't been the issue for quite some time for people. It's really been the inflationary pressures and the cost of living, which is why so many people aren't even tuned into this and don't notice when we have these massive revisions.
I have to tell you, I'm in Florida right now, and specifically I'm in West Palm, and it is one of the bigger bubbles I have seen. I mean, Florida is a bubble in and of itself, and here in West Palm, it is. I mean, there's a guy I found out at dinner last night. There's a guy who bought up a bunch of houses right on the ocean. He bought $500 million in land, and he's building a $500 million house, and he's not a Saudi. He probably has 2 or 3 children, so you can understand this. But you're in Florida, you're especially in places like this. Boy, it doesn't feel like anything is wrong with the economy.
Right. So this is the haves and the have-nots, and it's part of what makes it so difficult when we talk about the economy, because what we have witnessed over the last decade and a half is this massive Fed and government policy-induced wealth transfer from Main Street America to the wealthy and wealth-connected. So when you go to the West Palm beaches, when you go to the these little bubble areas in Southern California and whatnot, the prices of real estate are going through the roof. People are driving McLarens, and it's this crazy display of wealth that they've gotten through the inflation of the assets, because they were these massive asset holders. At the same time that the people who are on Main Street America didn't have the opportunity to participate in that upside, are seeing their cost of living go through the roof and not being able to keep up. So it really is a tale of two different economies. And when you average that out with this massive wealth at the top, it looks like things are kind of moving along. And that's why I don't think that the way that we portray data is fair or gives us really a great sense of what's happening for most of the country, and why, some people in the Democratic Party seem to be scratching their heads and going, I don't understand. This is a fantastic economy. Bidenomics is working great, when we know that the middle class has been getting crushed.
Well, if you're living in, the Washington, D.C. area, of course, there's lots of employment because the government is employing lots of people.
They are, and they're doing it on the backs of adding more debt and more inflationary pressure. that has, been really what we've been paying for quite literally, particularly over the past couple of years. So there is this delusion, and it's happening on Wall Street. It's happening in these different bubble areas that people who are in these areas that have created this tipping of the playing field that has tilted things in their direction. They're going, this is working great. I don't understand why everybody's complaining, when they have been doing it at the expense of, free, true, fair and free, true capitalism that, has been impacting the lives of the people who are working and who are the backbone of our economy.
So I'm driving in some of these neighborhoods. I was driving by Mar-a-Lago yesterday, and that was from the 1920s. A lot of these homes that are huge like this were from the 1920s, and those were the Jay Gatsby, F. Scott Fitzgerald days. And I started thinking, when did the Newport, Rhode Island thing fall apart? Was that during the Depression, when people started not living like that anymore? Do you know?
I don't think so, because just being a Jackie Kennedy researcher, and if you think about all the time that their family and the Kennedys spent out at the Hammersmith farm where she got married, and that whole area, that was pretty extravagant. And their marriage was in the early 50s, 53-ish. So I don't think it was at that point in time.
So I don't know if you saw the Wall Street Journal today, but the headline, do you have that headline by any chance, Stu?
Don't have it handy, no.
Yeah, the headline was the latest dirty word in corporate America, ESG. And it says, following the years of simmering investor backlash, political pressure, and legal threats over environmental, social, and governance, a number of businesses, corporate, have shed ESG. Now they're just calling it corporate responsibility. Is this a win, Carol, or is this just a shell game again?
So can I answer both? Can I give all of the above?
Okay.
I definitely think that there is some win, and I think the part that we need to take to heart is that by the noise that you've made, Glenn, and others have made, and the action that your listeners and others have taken in talking about this and really putting it under a microscope, has given pushback to corporate America. And they're seeing that it's not only not working, that it's detracting from their businesses. Even BlackRock, which we know has been sort of patient zero in the U.S. of ESGS, they're laying off a bunch of employees, something around 600 employees, mainly in their ESG division because of the pushback. So I do think that piece is a victory, but it's kind of like the ant problems that many of us have in our house, that, you can spray for them and kill them in one season, but they're going to come back out the next season. So you still have to bring the exterminator out again. And unfortunately, that's the case with ESG, and something that you and I had begun to talk about. You actually brought it to my attention, with these natural asset companies that are looking to, same kind of thing, bastardize capitalism, use corporate money, use pension money to buy control or management of lands, whether those be public or private, to try to take them out of productive use, threatening our food, our land, and our water. So,
it's insanity. They decided to wait on that, right? They didn't say, no, they're not going to do it. They decided to wait. The SEC decided, correct?
Well, so they were due with the rule January 2nd, and they've extended the comment period to January 18th. I've sent comments. I've actually posted them on my Twitter feed. If anybody wants, they're welcome to copy and paste and send them in to the SEC or to anyone, whether it be their representatives, whether it be their state treasurers, whether it be their governors. I know that Marlo Oaks from Utah, who you've had on the program, is one of the key voices against this. And that we need more people like that, because not only do we need the SEC to say, no, the New York Stock Exchange can't list them. That's just one way these groups can access capital. It doesn't mean that NACs don't exist. It doesn't mean they can't go to the private market or sovereign wealth funds, privately to try to go and do this. So we really do need legislation that says this is something that needs to go away. So a little bit of a celebration, Glenn, but the job isn't done yet.